And so we overlook the one diversity that actually keeps us alive, biodiversity. And then we have to make a connection here. Is the way we treat one another, the way we treat people of different ethnicities, race, religion, nationalities, how does that reflect in how we treat non-human species? Is there a connection? Because to me, it all seems to be one word, the other. If it's not us, it's the other. And we treat the other quite differently than we treat ourselves. So, this is where I generally run into resistance. I don't have any hope. I have zero hope. And I feel a lot better. It doesn't mean I sit around and throw up my hands and give up. What it actually means is I've come to a place where I see, for me, maybe for the first time in my incredibly privileged life of being a white heterosexual male born in the United States, I see reality presented to me for the very first time. There are plenty of people on this planet and people sitting in this room who have a much larger taste of reality than I have ever had. I went through years of just floating around and not having to deal with any of this. We don't believe in predicaments in our cultural narrative. We believe in problem solving. Everything's a problem and we can solve it. It's interesting because we actually have a word, predicament, we have a definition for it, but predicaments don't have solutions. So we have the word, we just don't believe in it. And I run into this all the time when I interview people on our radio show and when I give presentations. Because what they fail to do often is address the root. Because to address the root is to address not only these things, and they can get by the 238,000 people a day, they can get by the putting 1 billion people on the planet in 6 million years and now doing it every 12. They can get by that we've lost upwards to 90% of large fish in the ocean because we overfish, and that we almost eliminate up to 200 species a day. They can handle all of that. They can handle the melting of the Arctic ice, no Arctic ice, potentially this summer or over the next 3 years for the first time in human history, and they can get over the fact that it's privilege doing it. But what they can't get past is that the way they're addressing it and the way they're going about solving it is just simply negotiating with what's never been negotiable. They're negotiating with a living arrangement that is linear when the living planet is secular. They believe that we can go up forever if we just elect the right person, we just pass the right policy, we just boycott the right products, we just plant organic, eat local, have free-range chickens, and support social and environmental causes, and maybe listen to NPR. But what they don't address is the actual living arrangement. And so, for the most part, they go through these, and they're the stages of grief. Because when you start to unravel the very fabric of who you are, in the way you've lived your life, in the way you thought life worked, because I've confused it. I thought making a living was living. It's not even remotely close. They're completely different. One is actually cooperating with your planet. The other one is consuming it at an alarming rate. And so what happens is people generally go, and I went through these, you go through denial, that's not that bad. I've generally been called, here's the things I've been called. I've been called a fatalist, an alarmist, and a doomer. I'm all of those, clearly. If you don't find it alarming at this point, I'd ask, where's your line in the sand? Because it seems to be getting quite fatal to me. I'm still, at times, in the anger stage. You can hear it in my voice. I am no longer in the bargaining, negotiating stage. I told you the way I live. I live in a tent. I live in a yurt. Come on, going yurt with no windows. It's got an open dome where you pull a piece of canvas and you get some sunlight. It's got a door about this high. It's 4.5 feet at the door. It's 9 feet in the middle. It's 300 square feet. It's round. It's made out of wood, quilts, and canvas. I have a wood-burning stove. I have a camp stove that runs on a little propane thing. I have an outdoor kitchen with a hydrant for water. I share a bathroom facility shower with an entire community that runs on solar. And I generally walk to my Wi-Fi. I don't have a cell phone that works out there. I have a track phone that I use when I come to a city once in a while so I can make a phone call. I lived without a car for 4 years, but my wife bought a 1996 205,000 mile Toyota Camry 3 days ago that we hope lasts a little while. I still rent cars. That's why we bought it. I still fly. I still use computers. I still do all those things. So even though I live the way I live, it is not going to make a difference at all with the hidden relationships I talked about earlier. I still go to the store. I garden. I raise pigs. We raise chickens on our property. It won't make a blip. We could take this continent and have people live the way I live, and it wouldn't make a difference because I'm still on the industrial model. I still deal with hidden relationships. These are the shoes that I ordered. I'm a runner. And so when people tell me it's fantastic what I'm doing, if we could all just do that, that's right here. That's just negotiating with what's not negotiable. And then you get depressed because you realize that you're in a predicament and there's not a solution. And we don't live in a culture that believes in them. And so when you start telling people, their heads start spinning and they start going, yeah, but what if? The guy that I co-host my show with is named Dr. Guy McPherson. He is a professor emeritus at University of Arizona, ecology. He studies climate, and we talk about the impacts of climate change and what's baked into the cake already. In other words, things that we've done 10 years ago, you're starting to see now. What does that have to do with racial justice? It has everything to do with racial justice. Because those things, this machine doesn't keep running without the oppression. Because in order to have privilege like me, privilege doesn't exist without oppression. Wealth does not exist without poverty. So when I hear people talking about eradicating poverty, I have to smile. I'm like, are you going to abolish wealth? Because the living arrangement that we have encourages people to get theirs. If you come to a place and you're fortunate enough to get to a place of acceptance, which I get to once in a while, and then I slip back into some of the others, you will find it liberating. But what people confuse it with is they confuse it with sitting around and doing nothing, throwing their hands up and giving up. So what they do is they generally get a glimpse of acceptance, but then they jump right back into negotiations. We want our cake and eat it too. So this particular column is generally the social negotiations we go through. The column next to it is the environmental negotiations we go through. We do everything possible, but consider dismantling the actual living arrangement. Because if we dismantle the living arrangement, what happens? If we dismantle the actual structure, the way we live in this world, it's called the industrial global economy. What happens? What happens to you, and what happens to you, and what happens to me? We die. I had this discussion with the last year I taught my students, and they came up with every negotiation you could possibly imagine. I taught in Avondale. I brought this up. Kids are like, well, I could rollerblade to Prescott with a rifle and shoot elk. I'm like, well, one, it's uphill on rollerblades. Two, do you have a rifle? And three, when you shoot the elk, you know how to dress it down? You gonna refrigerate it? Because you got a refrigerator with you? How are you gonna do this? The reality started to come to them. Then there's a lot of man-made little ponds around Avondale. Oh, well, just fish. I go, do you know how many people live in Avondale? About 80,000 people live in Avondale. Avondale is a perfect example of how our culture, it's a microcosm of how our culture grew. In Avondale, in 1950, there were about 6,500 people. In 1990, there were 16,000 people. Avondale eventually was surrounded by the I-10 and the 101. If you took a picture of the high school I worked at, Westview High School in 1989, if you took an aerial shot, which there's one in the office, in 1989, that school was surrounded by cotton fields. If you took a picture today, it's surrounded by retail and neighborhoods. It's surrounded by economic growth. And so if you got rid of the I-10, if you got rid of the 101, you asked everybody to live with what's in Avondale right now, what's in their houses, what's in the stores, what's in that little area, how long do you think they'd last?
3 days.
That's, yeah, maybe. Because it requires hidden relationships to run. And those hidden relationships require growth to be maintained. And they require injustice. They require racial injustice. They require patriarchy. They require a list. And so, what's our response to the narrative? Well, we've talked about what our responses are. They're generally negotiations. What we generally don't do is challenge the actual way we've been taught to respond. Now, I'm not necessarily endorsing any of these things, but we're always told to have orderly conduct. We're never considered disorderly conduct, because if you listen to somebody like Wolf Blitzer in last spring when he's talking about what happened in Baltimore after Freddie Gray was killed, Wolf Blitzer is shocked what he's seeing on the news. He's shocked that people are reacting the way they're reacting, because his version of the narrative, the response should be orderly. Well, he's a white guy. He's a very privileged white guy. And the protest should always be peaceful. He's shocked that people are acting the way, of course he's shocked. He has no idea how other people experience the narrative that he's experiencing. His version of the narrative. And so, we do everything, and we keep the concept of the hierarchy intact. And we keep most of our actions human-based. So, if I walked in this morning with this mask on, and this t-shirt, a lot of people that are in my circles who are very progressive folks would start to freak out. Because this is always the given. You can't bring up something like anarchy, because people have this concept in their head of what anarchy is. I'm not necessarily promoting anarchy, but at the same time, I have the ability to at least question why this is a given. And then generally they say, well, isn't it pretty divisive to call yourself a race traitor? I'm not calling myself anything. But if you have a certain loyalty to a particular category that you were born into, you have to ask yourself, why do you have that loyalty? Did you somehow earn that category? Because I surely didn't earn my whiteness. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity, I've been told. Well, is treason to the narrative loyalty to justice? Well, I don't know. So here's the questions. How do we dismantle something most of us don't even recognize? Doesn't dismantling mean more suffering and death? I don't have an answer for that. There's a lot of suffering and death going on right now. Is there another way to pursue justice? That's generally where the negotiations begin. Alternative learning lens, initiating cooperative education. That's the workshop I'm doing next. And that's the approach I'm taking about what I'm doing and what I'm trying to promote as a response within a predicament, within something that doesn't have a solution. And it really comes down to this. It really comes down to listening to folks who have been telling us for centuries their truth and believing them. When countless generations have been telling me that a particular living arrangement has had its boot upon their collective throats, why would I doubt it? Because I have a dysfunctional loyalty to a particular set of living arrangements and a particular set of categories I was born into, for no particular reason. And so, is this about humanity? Clearly it's not. It's bigger than us. Why should you listen to me? You shouldn't. But I believe treason to our narrative is loyalty to justice. Question everything, including this. Questions, comments, concerns?